Are you truly wasting money by renting? Are you really being lied to about the benefits of owning a home? Or are you being lied to about being lied to? There's a saying that figures don't lie, but liars figure. So I decided to run the numbers myself. And what I found might surprise you. The decision to buy or rent is not always purely a financial one, but in this video I'm going to be focusing on the financial aspect. Comparing the cost of renting versus buying is not a simple exercise, and to be honest, it is impossible to be 100% accurate because there are many different variables involved. To make it simple to understand, I'm going to be making two important assumptions. I'm going to assume that all the costs associated with buying and renting are fixed for a 30-year period starting in January 1993. Additionally, I'm going to assume that there are no tax advantages for owning a home, simply because for most people, there isn't. Now let's break it down. The average cost to rent a home in the US in 1993 was $988 per month, totaling $355,680 over a 30-year period. There's also usually an upfront cost in the form of a security deposit, which would add an additional $988 to the total, making the full cost of renting for 30 years $356,668. The cost of ownership involves down payment, principal and interest, closing costs, property taxes, home insurance, HOA fees, as well as maintenance and repairs. It includes a down payment of at least 20% if you want to avoid the additional expense of private mortgage insurance. You would also need to pay closing costs of at least 3% of the sales price. The average home price in 1993 was $126,500, so a 20% down payment would be $25,300. Principal and interest payment for a mortgage of $101,200 with an interest rate of 7.17% in 1993 would have been $685 per month. Using a rate of 1.1% of the home's value, the property tax would be $116 per month. A rate of 0.6% of the sales price would give us a home insurance expense of $63 per month. There's also a HOA fee of $50 per month. Home ownership means that you will inevitably have some maintenance and repair costs, which must be included to arrive at the true cost of ownership. A good rule is to set aside at least 1% of the value of the home to cover yearly repairs and maintenance. 1% of $126,500 means an expense of $105 per month in repairs. When all these additional expenses are added to the principal and interest, the average monthly cost to own in 1993 was $1,020. The argument for renting over buying is rooted in a concept known as opportunity cost, which in this case means the cost associated with choosing a particular investment over the next best investment. The proponents for renting argue that if you use the difference between renting and owning to invest in an S&P 500 index fund, you would see a greater return. This return would be the opportunity cost of owning. However, we also have to factor in the upfront cost of ownership. The down payment of $25,300 and the closing cost of $7,795 must also be added to the opportunity cost of ownership. If the upfront cost plus the difference between renting and owning were invested in an S&P 500 index fund for 30 years, started in January 1993, the total return would be $110,030. Now let's look at what the return would be if you had decided to buy instead of rent. The total monthly cost for owning over 30 years is $367,200 plus down payment and closing cost totaling $396,295. Since the average cost of a home in January 2023 was $474,400, we would subtract the total cost of ownership to determine the return from buying, which would be $78,105. When the returns from renting and owning are compared, there's a difference of $31,790 in favor of renting, which would suggest that renting is the better financial option. However, it does not end there. We still have to consider the fact that if you were to liquidate the house and the index fund, there would be additional expenses for both assets. Selling the house means that you would incur a seller closing cost of at least 8% of the sales price, which would reduce the return from buying to $40,153. On the other hand, selling the index fund is a taxable event, so the return from renting would also be reduced. Using an effective tax rate of about 13.74% would mean that the real return would be $94,912. Comparing the returns after both assets are sold would give us a difference of $54,759, again in favor of renting over buying, but by a wider margin. Based on the numbers that I just presented, it is clear that for at least the first 30 years, it is financially better to rent and invest the difference along with the upfront expenses for buying into a S&P 500 index fund. However, if you decide to keep the home, after 30 years, you would not have to worry about paying a mortgage. So your monthly housing cost would be about $1,080, while the renter would be paying a median rent of $1,966 in January 2023. So based on this example, if you own, your housing cost will be significantly less after 30 years, while the cost of renting would be significantly more. At this stage in your life, you would be close to or at retirement age. So the question is, would you want to be paying more for housing costs or less? The decision to buy or rent a home can be complex and involves various factors. While the numbers may sway in favor of renting, this will only work if the individual has the discipline to invest the difference and the upfront costs associated with buying. Otherwise, you would be wasting money by renting, and buying would be a better option since it is a form of forced investing. The numbers in this example are averages, which means that depending on where you live, the cost to rent or buy could be higher or lower, which may lead to a different result. You will have to run the numbers to see what is best for you. One thing is certain, you should never rent or buy a house that you cannot afford. If you like the video, please remember to like, share, subscribe. See you next time.